Imagine a grand Cornish manor, perched on cliffs where the sea whispers secrets. A gunshot echoes in the night, and a man lies dead in a locked boathouse, the tide swallowing his killer's tracks. Was it the restless heir, desperate to secure his fortune, the actress with a shadowy past, or the bitter widow, knitting lies with every stitch? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, steps into a web of alibis, where every clue a cigarette, but a brass button, a rust-stained handkerchief hides a truth. Who pulled the trigger? And why does the tide hold the key? Dive into the secret of the sunken alibi, a classic Agatha Christie mystery where nothing is as it seems, and the truth will shock you. Chapter 1. The gathering at Cresthaven Manor in the soft glow of an autumn evening. Cresthaven Manor stood like a sentinel over the cliffs of Cornwall, its ivy-clad walls bathed in the fading light of a September sun. The estate, owned by the widowed Lady Eleanor Ashby, was a grand relic of Edwardian opulence, its sprawling lawns and ornate interiors whispering of a bygone era. Tonight, the manor buzzed with an uneasy anticipation, for Lady Eleanor had summoned a select group of guests for a weekend retreat, a gathering that, unbeknownst to them, would soon be overshadowed by murder. The drawing room, with its mahogany paneling and crystal chandelier, was a picture of refinement. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, stood near the fireplace, sipping a glass of sherry and observing the assembled company. He had been invited at the behest of Lady Eleanor, who sought Poirot's discreet counsel on a matter she described only as delicate. Poirot himself had yet to arrive, detained by a late train from London, leaving Hastings to take stock of the guests. Lady Eleanor, a woman of 50 with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority, presided over the room. Her silk gown rustled as she moved, greeting each guest with a practiced smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Her son, Julian Ashby, a lanky man in his late 20s, lounged in an armchair, his demeanor one of bored indifference, though his fingers fidgeted with a silver cigarette case. Beside him sat his fiancée, Miss Clara Beaumont, a strikingly beautiful actress whose laughter rang a touch too loud, as if to mask some inner disquiet. Dr. Harold Vance, the local physician, stood by the window, his stern face softened by the glow of twilight. He was a man of few words, his medical bag resting at his feet like a faithful hound. Across the room, Mrs. Lavinia Gray, a widowed cousin of Lady Eleanor, whereupon furiously, her needles clicking in rhythm with her sharp tongue. She had a habit of dropping pointed remarks, each one landing like a dart. Finally, there was Mr. Reginald Poole, a solicitor from London, whose polished manners and meticulous attire suggested a man who thrived on order. Much like Poirot himself, the conversation, polite but strained, revolved around the weather, the state of the stock market, and the recent discovery of a Roman coin on the manor's grounds. Yet Hastings sensed an undercurrent of tension, as if each guest were guarding a secret. He noted the way Julian's eyes darted toward Clara when she spoke to Dr. Vance, and how Mrs. Gray's knitting paused whenever Lady Eleanor mentioned her late husband's estate. Dinner was announced at precisely 7 o'clock, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long oak table gleamed under candlelight. The meal was exquisite roast pheasant, buttered asparagus, and a claret of exceptional vintage, but the atmosphere remained taut. Hastings, seated beside Clara, found her charming but evasive, her answers to his questions about her theatrical career vague and rehearsed. As dessert was served, Lady Eleanor rose, her face pale but composed. "My friends," she began, her voice steady, "I have invited you here not merely for pleasure, but to address a matter of grave importance." There, Is a question of inheritance a document, a will, that has caused discord? She paused, her gaze sweeping the table. I had hoped to resolve this quietly, but I fear. Her words were cut short by a scream from the hall. The guests froze, forks clattering against plates. Hastings leapt to his feet, his military instincts kicking in, and followed Lady Eleanor to the source of the sound. In the dimly lit corridor, they found the housekeeper, Mrs. Tuttle, wringing her hands, her face ashen. It's the boathouse, my lady, she stammered. I went to fetch more coal, and then there's someone down there, lying still. Hastings, his heart pounding, led the charge toward the boathouse, a small structure nestled by the manor's private cove. The tide was high, the air thick with the scent of salt and seaweed. Inside, under the flickering light of a lantern, lay the body of Reginald Poole, the solicitor. His lifeless eyes stared at the ceiling, a single bullet wound in his chest, the blood pooling on the wooden floor. A revolver lay just beyond his outstretched hand, glinting in the dim light. The guests crowded at the entrance, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Lady Eleanor clutched her pearls, her composure cracking. Julian swore under his breath, while Clara clung to his arm, her face buried in his shoulder. Dr. Vance knelt beside the body, his fingers probing for a pulse, though it was clear none would be found. Murder, Dr. Vance said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence. Shot through the heart, not more than an hour ago. Hastings felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea breeze. He glanced at his watch. 8:15 p.m. The tide was rising, the boathouse cut off from the mainland by water. Whoever had killed Reginald Poole was still among them, trapped within the confines of Cresthaven Manor. As the guests retreated to the manor, whispering and casting wary glances, Hastings knew one thing for certain. Hercule Poirot would arrive, to find a puzzle as intricate as any he had ever faced. The little gray cells would have their work cut out for them. Chapter 2. The shadow of suspicion. The discovery of Reginald Poole's body cast a pall over Cresthaven Manor, transforming the elegant retreat into a stage for suspicion. The guests, shaken and subdued, gathered in the drawing room, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. The boathouse, now a crime scene, was sealed off by Dr. Vance's stern directive, though the rising tide made tampering unlikely. Hastings, standing by the window, felt the weight of the moment, his thoughts racing as he awaited the arrival of Hercule Poirot. The local constable, a ruddy-faced man named Sergeant Brooks, arrived shortly after 9, his notebook in hand and his manner brisk but overwhelmed. He took statements with a dogged determination, though it was clear he was out of his depth. A bad business, this, he muttered, scribbling notes as he questioned the guests. Mr. Poole, shot dead, and not a soul saw a thing. We'll need the yard, no doubt about it. Hastings observed the group closely, noting their alibis with a soldier's precision. Lady Eleanor claimed she had been in the dining room, overseeing the staff until the scream interrupted her. Julian Ashby said he'd stepped onto the terrace for a cigarette at around 7:45 p.m., alone, though he admitted he'd heard nothing unusual. Clara Beaumont, tearful and trembling, insisted she'd been in the powder room, refreshing her makeup, a claim no one could verify. Dr. Vance had been in the library, reviewing medical journals, while Mrs. Lavinia Gray swore she'd never left. Her knitting in the drawing room, her needles clicking like a metronome all evening. Each alibi was plausible, yet Hastings sensed gaps, moments unaccounted for, glances exchanged. The boathouse was a 10-minute walk from the manor, down a winding path to the cove. The tide, as Sergeant Brooks confirmed, had begun to rise at 7:30 p.m., cutting off access by 8 o'clock. The murder, per Dr. Vance's estimate, occurred between 7:15 and 7:45. Whoever pulled the trigger had been swift, precise, and unnoticed. As the constable fumbled through his questions, the door swung open, and a familiar figure stepped into the room. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit and polished shoes, entered with the air of a man entirely at ease. His mustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed under the chandelier, and his green eyes sparkled with quiet curiosity. Hastings felt a surge of relief. The little Belgian detective had a knack for unraveling the impossible. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot exclaimed, clasping his friend's hand. "I arrive, and what do I find? A tragedy, a puzzle, a challenge for the little Grace cells." He turned to Lady Eleanor, bowing slightly. "Madam, I am desolate to learn of this misfortune. Permit me to offer my services." Lady Eleanor, pale but composed, nodded. "Mr. Poirot, your reputation precedes you. We are in dire need of clarity." Poirot surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each guest as if reading their souls. "A murder, Nest's pause. In the boathouse, with a revolver. Most intriguing. Tell me, Sergeant, what have you learned?" Sergeant Brooks, flustered, recounted the facts. Reginald Poole, shot once through the heart. Found at 8:15 p.m. The revolver, a Webley, bore no fingerprints, wiped clean. The boathouse door was unlocked, and no one admitted to hearing a shot, though the crashing waves might have masked the sound. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Bon. And the alibis? Everyone. They are accounted for." Brooks hesitated. "Well, sir, they've all given their stories, but it's a bit muddled. No one saw anyone near the boathouse, and the tides made a mess of any tracks." "Precisement," Poirot murmured. "The tide, it is a convenient ally for our murderer. But the truth, it does not hide so easily." He turned to the guests, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, I shall require your cooperation. A man is dead, and among us is one who knows more than they say. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover this truth." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Clara dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, while Julian lit another cigarette, his hands trembling slightly. Mrs. Gray's knitting needles faltered, and Dr. Vance's jaw tightened. Lady Eleanor, however, met Poirot's gaze with a flicker of something fear, perhaps, or defiance. Poirot requested to see the boathouse, and Hastings accompanied him, along with Sergeant Brooks. The night air was cool, the path to the cove slick with dew. The boathouse loomed ahead, its wooden walls weathered by salt and time. Inside, Poole's body remained, covered now with a sheet. Poirot knelt, examining the scene with meticulous care. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to the floor. "The blood, it pools here, but there's no splatter on the walls. The shot was close, deliberate, and this revolver mon Dieu, it is too convenient, left so near the hand, a suggestion of suicide. Perhaps, but no, the angle, it is wrong." He picked up a small object from the flora-sodden cigarette butt, half crushed. "Curio," he muttered, slipping it into an envelope. "And the door, it was unlocked, you say?" "Yet the key is in the lock, on the inside." Hastings frowned. "Could someone have locked it after the murder, then slipped out?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, mon ami, or perhaps the lock tells us more than we think." The tide, The key, the cigarette, they are threads in our tapestry. Back at the manor, Poirot declined to question the guests further that night. They are shaken, Hastings, he said as they retired to their rooms. Let them stew in their thoughts. Tomorrow, we shall see what secrets unravel. As Hastings lay in bed, the sound of the waves echoing in his ears, he couldn't shake the image of Poole's lifeless eyes. The manor, with its polished surfaces and hidden tensions, felt like a chessboard, and Poirot was already planning his opening move. Chapter 3. The Rival of Hercule Poirot. Morning after Reginald Poole's murder dawned grey and heavy, the Cornish sky draped in clouds that mirrored the gloom within Cresthaven Manor. The guests, summoned to the drawing-room by Lady Eleanor, sat in uneasy silence, their breakfast untouched. Captain Hastings, nursing a cup of strong tea, felt the weight of the previous night's events pressing upon him. The image of Poole's body in the boathouse lingered, as did the memory of Poirot's enigmatic remarks about the cigarette butt and the lock. Hercule Poirot entered the room at precisely 9 o'clock, his demeanor as polished as his patent leather shoes. His mustache twitched slightly as he surveyed the assembled company, his green eyes sharp and unyielding. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice a blend of courtesy and authority. A tragic affair has brought us together, but fear not, Hercule Poirot is here to bring order to this chaos. Lady Eleanor, seated at the head of the room, inclined her head. Mr. Poirot, we are grateful for your presence. The police are limited in their resources. We trust you will uncover the truth. Poirot bowed slightly, then turned to Sergeant Brooks, who stood awkwardly by the door. Sergeant, you have informed Scotland Yard. And they will send an inspector. Brooks nodded. Yes, sir. Inspector Japp's on his way, but he won't arrive till this afternoon. The tide's still high, and the roads are muddy. Bon, Poirot said, his fingers brushing his mustache. Then we have time to begin. Hastings, mon ami, you will assist me. Nest's pause. Hastings, ever eager to play his part, straightened. Of course. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each guest. Julian Ashby slouched in his chair, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. Clara Beaumont, pale but composed, clutched a handkerchief, her beauty undimmed by grief. Dr. Harold Vance stood stiffly, his medical bag at his side, while Mrs. Lavinia Gray's knitting needles clicked with a nervous rhythm. Lady Eleanor, though regal, seemed diminished, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Let us commence, Poirot said, pacing slowly. Mr. Poole was murdered last night, between 7:15 and 7:45, in the boathouse. The tide, it isolated the manor, making escape impossible. The murderer, therefore, is among us. A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand. I wish to understand the man who died. Tell me, who was Reginald Poole to you? Lady Eleanor spoke first. Mr. Poole was our family solicitor. He handled my late husband's estate, and was reviewing certain documents related to the inheritance. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Documents. Madam, of what nature? She hesitated, her fingers tightening. A codicil to my husband's will. It concerned the distribution of Cresthaven and its assets. There were disagreements. Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. With whom? Julian Ashby shifted uncomfortably. Mother, you needn't air our laundry. Poole was meddling. That's all. He wanted to change things. That were settled. Clara placed a hand on Julian's arm. Darling, don't. Mr. Poirot needs to know. She turned to Poirot, her voice soft. Mr. Poole was thorough, perhaps too thorough. He questioned Julian's claim to the estate, suggesting it might be contested. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Contested? By whom? Mrs. Gray's needles paused. By me, if you must know, she said sharply. My late cousin's will was clear, or so I thought. But Poole claimed there was ambiguity, that the estate might pass elsewhere if certain conditions weren't met. Dr. Vance cleared his throat. Poole was a stickler for detail. He came to me last week, asking about my treatment of Lord Ashby before his death. Wanted to know if the old man was of sound mind when he signed the codicil. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And was he, Doctor? Vance met his eyes steadily. Lord Ashby was frail, but his mind was sharp as ever. I told Poole as much. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. And you, Mademoiselle Beaumont, what was your impression of Monsieur Poole? Clara's lips trembled. He was polite, but distant. He asked me about my past, my career. I thought it odd, but he said it was relevant to the estate. Poirot turned to Hastings. Mon ami, you observed these people last night. Did you note anything unusual before the scream? Hastings frowned, recalling the dinner. There was tension, Poirot. Julian seemed agitated, and Clara was evasive about her time in London. Mrs. Gray made a remark about greedy hands. I assumed she meant the inheritance. And Poole. He was quiet, almost watchful. Precisement, Poirot murmured. The little details, they speak loudly. He addressed the group. I will examine the boathouse again, and I ask that no one leaves the manor. Sergeant, please ensure this. Brooks nodded, and Poirot gestured for Hastings to follow. They descended to the boathouse, now accessible as the tide had receded. The air was damp, the scent of seaweed mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood. Poole's body had been removed, but the chalk outline remained, stark against the wooden floor. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the outline. The shot was close, Hastings, yet no one heard it. Curious, none? And this, he pointed to a faint smudge near the door, a trace of mud shaped like a partial footprint. The tide washed away much, but not all. He examined the lock again, his brow furrowing. The key. It was inside, yet the door was unlocked. Why lock it? Only to leave it so? And the cigarette butt Julian smokes, does he not? Hastings nodded. Yes, but so do others. It's hardly proof. Proof? No, Poirot said, smiling faintly. But a thread? Yes. The mind of the murderer is like a tapestry, Hastings. We must find each thread and follow it. As they returned to the manor, Hastings felt a growing unease. Poirot's calm confidence was reassuring, but the web of motives, inheritance, jealousy, secrets was tightening. Someone in that drawing room had killed Reginald Poole, and Poirot's little grey cells were already weaving the pattern of their guilt. Chapter 4. The questions beginth morning at Cresthaven Manor unfolded with a strained formality, as if the very walls held their breath. Hercule Poirot, fortified by a cup of tisane and his unyielding sense of order, began his methodical interrogation of the guests. The drawing-room, with its heavy drapes and polished furniture, served as his stage, and Captain Hastings, ever the faithful observer, sat nearby, notebook in hand, ready to capture the nuances of each exchange. Poirot had requested private interviews, and Lady Eleanor, eager to restore calm, had agreed. The guests, though reluctant, complied, each entering the room with a mix of apprehension and defiance. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his posture impeccable, his green eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. Hastings marveled at his friend's ability to appear both unassuming and commanding, a paradox that disarmed even the most guarded. First was Lady Eleanor, her silk shawl draped elegantly over her shoulders. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady but tinged with fatigue, "I trust you understand the delicacy of our situation. Reginald Poole's death is a tragedy, but it must not ruin us." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, I seek only the truth. Tell me, what was this delicate matter you wished to discuss with me before the murder?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting a pearl ring. "It concerned the codicil to my husband's will. Poole believed it might be invalid, that my husband was coerced. He was thorough, perhaps too thorough. It caused friction, especially with Julian, and with others." Poirot pressed gently. Her eyes flickered. "Mrs. Gray, my cousin, felt entitled to a larger share. She and Poole argued often. But murder, surely not." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And your movements last evening, between 7:15 and 7:45? "I was in the dining room, overseeing the staff," she said firmly. "Mrs. Tuttle can confirm I never left." "Bon," Poirot said, dismissing her with a courteous smile. "We shall speak again." Next came Julian Ashby, his cigarette case clutched tightly, his eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. "Look here, Poirot," he said, slumping into the chair. "I didn't like Poole, I'll admit. He was poking into things, my inheritance, my engagement. But I didn't shoot him." Poirot's mustache twitched. "You were on the terrace, smoking, alone?" Julian nodded. "Yes, from about 7:40 to just before the scream. I needed air. Dinner was stifling. And you saw no one near the boathouse." Poirot's tone was mild, but his gaze was piercing. "No one," Julian said, though his fingers fumbled with the cigarette case. "It was dark, and the waves were loud." Poirot made a note. "This cigarette case, it is most elegant. Silver, engraved with your initials. You always carry it." Julian flushed. "Yes, always." "Why?" "A small matter," Poirot said, waving a hand. "You may go, monsieur." Clara Beaumont entered next, her beauty striking even in her distress. Her hands trembled as she sat, and Hastings noted the faint redness around her eyes. "Mr. Poirot," she said softly, "I'm frightened. Whoever did this? There. Still here." "Indeed, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "You were in the powder room, you say, at the time of the murder?" "Yes, freshening up," she replied. "I was alone. I heard nothing." Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Poole, he asked you about your past. Was there something he discovered, perhaps, that caused you unease?" Clara's lips parted, then closed. "He was curious about my time in London, my acting career. I told him it was irrelevant. I'm here for Julian, not the estate." "Precisement," Poirot murmured. "And yet, secrets, they have a way of surfacing. Non." Dr. Harold Vance was next, his manner brusque but composed. "I was in the library, reading," he said without preamble. "Poole's death is unfortunate, but I had no quarrel with him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "He questioned you about Lord Ashby's health, his mental state. Did this trouble you?" Vance's jaw tightened. "It was impertinent, but I answered truthfully. Lord Ashby was lucid when he signed the codicil. Poole's suspicions were baseless. And you heard nothing unusual? No shot, no footsteps?" "Nothing," Vance said firmly. The library is at the back of the manor, far from the boathouse. Finally, Mrs. Lavinia Gray entered, her knitting tucked under her arm. Her sharp eyes met Poirot's with a hint of defiance. "I've nothing to hide," she said. "I was in the drawing room, knitting, as I always do." Poole was a nuisance, stirring up trouble about the will. "You argued with him, madam?" Poirot asked. She sniffed. "Argued? I told him the truth, that the estate should have come to me, not Julian. My cousin promised me a share, but Poole's meddling threatened that." "And your movements?" Poirot pressed. "I never left the drawing room," she said, her needles clicking as if to punctuate her words. "Ask anyone." Poirot dismissed her, then turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, what do you make of these alibis?" Hastings frowned. "They're all convenient. No one admits to being near the boathouse, yet someone was there. And Julian's cigarette case, could that cigarette but you found be his?" Poirot smiled faintly. "A possibility, Hastings, but we must not leap. The alibis, they are like a house of cards, plausible, yet fragile. And the lock, the tide, the revolver, they tell a story. If we listen." As the interviews concluded, Inspector Japp arrived, his familiar brusqueness a contrast to Poirot's precision. "Well, Poirot," he said, shaking his hand, "you've got a mess here. A solicitor shot dead, and everyone's got an alibi tighter than a drum. What's your take?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The truth, Inspector, lies in the contradictions. A cigarette butt, a key, a smudge of mud, these are not accidents. Someone has woven a clever alibi, but Hercule Poirot will submerge it." Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. The game was afoot, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, unraveling the threads of a killer's deception. Chapter 5. The red herrings. The atmosphere in Cresthaven Manor grew heavier as the day wore on, the weight of suspicion pressing down on its inhabitants. Like the low clouds over the Cornish cliffs, Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the complexity of the case, continued his investigation with the precision of a watchmaker, while Captain Hastings and Inspector Japp followed in his wake, each grappling with the tangled web of alibis and motives. The arrival of Japp had brought a sense of official urgency, but it was Poirot's calm authority that held the room. By midday, the drawing room had become a makeshift headquarters, with Japp's constables stationed at the manor's entrances to prevent any guest from slipping away. The boathouse, now thoroughly searched, had yielded little beyond the cigarette butt, the smudged footprint, and the revolver, which Japp confirmed was unregistered and wiped clean of fingerprints. The absence of clear evidence only deepened the mystery, and Hastings sensed that Poirot was relishing the challenge. The guests, however, were growing restless. Julian Ashby paced the terrace, his cigarette case glinting as he lit yet another smoke. Clara Beaumont sat by the window, her delicate features drawn, while Mrs. Lavinia Gray's knitting needles clicked with increasing agitation. Dr. Vance maintained his stoic demeanor, though his eyes followed Poirot's every move. Lady Eleanor, ever the hostess, tried to maintain decorum, but her strained smiles betrayed her unease. Japp, frustrated by the lack of progress, turned to Poirot. "This is a right mess, Poirot. Everyone's got an alibi, and not a shred of physical evidence points to anyone. If you ask me, young Julian's the obvious suspect. He's got motive. Poole was meddling with his inheritance, and he was alone on the terrace, close enough to slip down to the boathouse." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The obvious, mon cher Japp, is often the least true. Monsieur Julian is, how you say, a red herring. His agitation, it is too visible, too convenient. The murderer. They are more subtle. Hastings raised an eyebrow. You think Julian's being framed? Not framed, perhaps, Poirot replied. But used. The cigarette, but in the boathouse, yes. It may be his, but why leave it there? A careless killer, or a clever one planting a clue. We must look beyond the surface. Japp grunted. Well, someone's lying. Let's shake things up. I'll have another go at them. See if anyone cracks. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Inspector. The pressure. It builds already. Let us observe, listen, and note the inconsistencies. I wish to speak with the housekeeper, Mrs. Tuttle. The staff. They see much that the guests do not. Mrs. Tuttle, a stout woman with a nervous habit of smoothing her apron, was summoned to the drawing-room. Her eyes darted between Poirot and Japp, her hands twisting. I don't know much, sir, she began. I was in the kitchen, preparing the dessert trays, until I went for coal and found him. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Madam Tuttle, you are the eyes and ears of this house. Tell me, did you see anyone near the boathouse before the scream? Perhaps earlier in the evening? She hesitated, then nodded. Well, sir, I did see Mr. Julian on the terrace, smoking, just as he said. And I saw Miss Clara, too, heading toward the gardens around 7:30. She looked in a hurry, but I thought nothing of it. Hastings exchanged a glance with Japp. Clara had claimed to be in the powder room, not the gardens. Poirot's expression remained impassive. And anyone else, madam? Mrs. Tuttle bit her lip. Dr. Vance, sir. He came through the kitchen around 7:20. Said he needed air. He went out the back door, toward the path to the cove. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting. And Madame Gray? Lady Eleanor. Mrs. Gray was in the drawing-room, knitting, as she always is, Mrs. Tuttle said. Lady Eleanor was in and out of the dining-room, checking on us. I didn't see either near the boathouse. Poirot thanked her, then turned to Hastings and Japp. You see, Msamis, the alibis, they begin to fray. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she was not in the powder room, and Dr. Vance, he was not in the library. The gardens, the cove, they are close to the boathouse. We must explore this further. Japp, eager for action, decided to confront Clara. She was called back to the drawing-room, her face pale as she faced the trio. Miss Beaumont, Japp said bluntly, you told us you were in the powder room at the time of the murder, but the housekeeper saw you in the gardens. Care to explain? Clara's eyes widened, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. I may have stepped out briefly for fresh air. It was stuffy indoors. I didn't go far. Just to the rose garden? Close enough to the boathouse path. Japp pressed. Did you see anything? Anyone? No, Clara said, her voice rising. I was alone, I swear. I didn't see Mr. Poole or anyone else. Poirot interjected, his tone soothing. Mademoiselle, calm yourself. You are engaged to Monsieur Julian, oui? Did Monsieur Poole's inquiries about your past cause you distress? Clara's lips trembled. He asked about my time in London, my associations. I told him it was nothing, just old gossip from the theater world. But he kept pressing, as if he thought I was hiding something. And were you? Poirot asked, his gaze unwavering. No, she said, but her voice faltered, and she looked away as Clara left. Japp shook his head. She's hiding something, Poirot. And that business about the garden sounds like she's covering her tracks. Perhaps, Poirot said. But the lie, It is not always the sign of guilt. Fear, shame, love, these, too, make one conceal. We must dig deeper. Ms. Hastings, scribbling notes, felt a growing sense of unease. The alibis were crumbling, and the red herrings, Julian's cigarette, Clara's whereabouts, Vance's stroll were clouding the truth. Yet Poirot's calm assurance suggested he was already piecing together the puzzle, his little gray cells sifting through the chaos to find the thread that would unravel the killer's design. Chapter 6. A clue. In detail. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over Cresthaven Manor, but the warmth did little to ease the chill of suspicion that gripped its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, with Captain Hastings and Inspector Japp at his side, continued his relentless pursuit of the truth behind Reginald Poole's murder. The boathouse, the tide, the cigarette butt, and the smudged footprint had begun to form a pattern in Poirot's mind. Though he kept his thoughts closely guarded, revealing only hints of his deductions, Poirot requested a return to the boathouse, insisting that the scene held secrets yet to be uncovered. The trio descended the winding path to the cove, the air sharp with salt and the distant cry of gulls. The boathouse stood silent, its wooden walls bearing the scars of wind and water. Inside, the chalk outline of Poole's body remained, a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the manor's tranquility. Poirot knelt beside the outline, his gloved fingers tracing the floorboards. "Observe, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "The blood, it pools here, but there is a faint mark, a smear, almost imperceptible, leading toward the door. Not a footprint, but a drag, perhaps of a cloth or shoe." Hastings squinted, barely discerning the faint streak. Could it be from the murderer cleaning up? "Precisement," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But what did they clean? Blood, perhaps, or something else. And this," he pointed to a small, glinting object wedged between two floorboards, nearly invisible in the dim light. Using a handkerchief, he carefully extracted a tiny brass button, engraved with a faint monogram, CACA. Japp mused, peering over Poirot's shoulder. Clara Ashby? Or could it be someone else? Poirot's mustache twitched. "We shall see, Inspector." The button. It is a clue, but not yet a solution. It is too small to be from a coat, perhaps a cuff, a blouse. We must inquire discreetly. They returned to the manor, where Poirot requested a private word with Mrs. Tuttle, the housekeeper, in the small parlor. Her nervous demeanor had not abated, her hands smoothing her apron as she faced Poirot's piercing gaze. "Madam Tuttle," he began, "you are observant, a quality I admire. Tell me, have you noticed any clothing among the guests, perhaps? A blouse or jacket missing a button?" Mrs. Tuttle frowned, then nodded slowly. "Now that you mention it, sir, I did notice Miss Clara's blouse yesterday, the one she wore at dinner. It's pale blue, with brass buttons. I saw her in the hall before dinner, and one of the cuffs looked loose, like a button was missing." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this blouse? You have seen it since?" "No, sir," she said. "She's been wearing a different frock today. I assumed it was being mended." "Merci, madam," Poirot said, dismissing her. He turned to Hastings and Japp. "The button. It belongs to Mademoiselle Beaumont. Yet she was in the gardens, not the boathouse, or so she claims. The discrepancy, it grows." Japp rubbed his chin. "That's damning, Poirot. Clara lied about her whereabouts, and now her button's at the crime scene. She's got motive." Tupule was digging into her past. Poirot raised a finger. "Patience, mon cher Japp. The button. It is a clue, but not the whole story. Why leave it behind? A careless mistake, or a deliberate misdirection? We must examine the timing. Hastings, flipping through his notebook, spoke up. The murder happened between 7:15 and 7:45, according to Dr. Vance. Clara says she was in the gardens around 7:30, but Mrs. Tuttle saw her heading that way. The boathouse is only a few minutes from the gardens. She could have slipped down there. Poirot said, but consider the tide. It began to rise at 7:30, cutting off the boathouse by 8 o'clock. The murderer had a narrow window. And the revolver, where did it come from? No one admits to owning it. Japp frowned. You're saying it's Tanit. Someone setting her up. Not setting up. Perhaps, Poirot replied, but guiding our eyes. The cigarette butt. It points to Julian. The button to Clara. The alibis. They crumble. But the truth remains hidden. We must look at the small things, the gesture, the word, the time. Poirot requested to see Clara's room, and Lady Eleanor, though hesitant, granted permission. Accompanied by a maid to maintain propriety, Poirot and Hastings searched Clara's wardrobe. The pale blue blouse was absent, but in a laundry basket they found a damp handkerchief, its edge stained with a faint reddish-brown mark. Blood? Hastings asked, his pulse quickening. Poirot examined it closely, sniffing the fabric. Not blood. Mon ami. Rust, perhaps, or mud. But why is it damp? The tide, the boathouse, they are connected. I think. As they left the room, Poirot paused, his gaze falling on a small photograph on Clara's dresser, a portrait of her and Julian, taken on a London pier. Clara's smile was radiant, but Julian's expression was strained, his hand gripping hers tightly. The heart, Hastings, Poirot murmured. It betrays much. Love, jealousy, fear, they are the currents beneath this crime. Back in the drawing room, the guests were visibly tense, their polite facades cracking under the strain of scrutiny. Poirot said nothing of the button or the handkerchief, but his presence alone seemed to tighten the noose of suspicion. Hastings watched him, marveling at how the little Belgian could unsettle a room with a single glance. Someone here knows more than they say, Poirot announced softly, his voice carrying a quiet menace. The clues, they speak, and Hercule Poirot listens. The truth. It will not remain submerged for long. As the guests exchanged uneasy glances, Hastings felt the puzzle tightening. The button, the handkerchief, the smudged footprint, they were pieces of a mosaic, and Poirot was slowly assembling them, inching closer to the killer's identity. Chapter 7. More lies. Surfacey tension in Cresthaven Manor thickened as the second day of the investigation unfolded, each guest's nerves fraying under the weight of Hercule Poirot's relentless scrutiny. The drawing room, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a courtroom, with Poirot as both judge and inquisitor. Captain Hastings, seated near the fireplace, watched his friend's meticulous mind at work, piecing together the fragments of truth buried beneath layers of deception. Inspector Japp, though diligent, was growing impatient, his faith in Poirot tempered by a desire for swift answers. The discovery of the brass button and the damp handkerchief had sharpened Poirot's focus, but he remained guarded, revealing little to Japp or the guests. Instead, he requested a detailed map of the manor's grounds, which Lady Eleanor provided, a meticulously drawn plan showing the house, gardens, terrace, and the path to the boathouse. Poirot studied it with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient text, his finger tracing the route from the gardens to the cove. Mon ami Hastings, he said, his voice low. The geography, it is crucial. The boathouse, it is isolated, yet not so far. The gardens, the terrace, they are stepping stones to murder. We must uncover what lies hidden in these spaces. Jap, pacing nearby, interjected. We've got Clara's button and that handkerchief, Poirot, and Julian's cigarette butt. It's looking bad for those two. Maybe they're in it together, lovers covering for each other. Poirot's mustache twitched. A tempting theory, Inspector, but too simple. The heart, it complicates, but the mind of the murderer is precise. Let us probe further. Poirot requested another round of interviews, this time focusing on the guests' relationships with Reginald Poole and each other. He began with Julian Ashby, whose agitation had grown more pronounced. Julian sat slumped in a chair, his cigarette case nowhere in sight, his hands fidgeting. Monsieur Ashby, Poirot began, his tone deceptively mild. You and Monsieur Poole, you had disagreements, about the inheritance. Julian's jaw tightened. He was trying to cut me out, Poirot said the codicil might favor Mrs. Gray or some distant cousin. I told him it was nonsense. Father wanted me to have Cresthaven. And Mademoiselle Beaumont? Poirot asked. Poole questioned her past. Did this trouble you? Julian's eyes flashed. Clara's past is her own business. Poole had no right to dig into it. He was looking for dirt, trying to discredit her engagement to me. Poirot leaned forward. And your cigarette case, where is it now? Julian flushed, patting his pockets. I must have misplaced it. I had it yesterday. But with all this chaos. Curio, Poirot murmured, dismissing him. As Julian left, Hastings whispered, his cigarette case is missing now. That's suspicious, Poirot. Indeed, Poirot replied. But suspicion is not proof. The case, it may yet surface. Clara Beaumont was next, her composure fragile, as she faced Poirot. Mademoiselle, he said, holding up the brass button in its handkerchief. This was found in the boathouse. It bears the initials C.A. Your initials, I believe. Clara's face paled, her hands trembling. I don't know how it got there. I lost a button from my blouse yesterday, but I was never in the boathouse. And the handkerchief? Poirot pressed, producing the damp, rust-stained cloth. This, too, was in your room. Why is it damp? Why the stain? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. I used it to wipe my hands after walking in the gardens. The fountain there, it's old, rusty. I didn't think anything of it. Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. You were seen in the gardens, mademoiselle, not the powder room. While Clara bit her lip. I didn't want Julian to know I'd gone out. He's been so tense, and I needed a moment alone. I swear, I didn't see Poole or go near the boathouse. As she left, sobbing softly, Jap shook his head. She's lying through her teeth, Poirot. That button places her at the scene. Perhaps, Poirot said, but the heart, it lies for many reasons. Let us continue. Mrs. Lavinia Gray entered, her knitting needles silent for once. Her sharp eyes met Poirot's with defiance. I've told you everything, she said. Poole was a meddler, but I didn't kill him. Poirot smiled faintly. Madam, you argued with him about the codicil. Did you know its contents? Mrs. Gray's lips pursed. I knew enough. My cousin promised me a share of Cresthaven, but Poole said the codicil was unclear, that it might favor another. He was protecting Julian, or so I thought. And your feelings toward Mademoiselle Beaumont? Poirot asked. Mrs. Gray snorted. She's an opportunist, latching onto Julian for his money. Poole thought so too. He told me she had a past she didn't want aired. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you, madam, where were you truly at 7:30? In the drawing room, as I said, she snapped. My knitting proves it. I finished a whole row that evening. Dr. Vance was last, his demeanor as rigid as ever. I've nothing new to add, he said. I was in the library, then took a brief walk out back. I didn't go near the boathouse. Poirot held up the map. The back door. It leads to the path to the cove, does it not? You could have reached the boathouse in minutes. Vance's jaw tightened. I could have, but I didn't. I returned to the library before the scream. As the interviews concluded, Poirot retreated to the terrace, staring out at the sea. Hastings joined him, puzzled. They're all hiding something, Poirot. Clara's button, Julian's missing cigarette case, Mrs. Gray's bitterness, Vance's walk. It's a tangle. We, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft. But the lies, they are like ripples on the water. They spread from a single point. The truth. The button, the handkerchief, the cigarette case, they are not accidents. Someone weaves a net, and we must find the knot. Hastings felt a chill, sensing that Poirot was closing in on a revelation. The lies were surfacing, but the killer's identity remained just out of reach, submerged in the murky depths of Cresthaven's secrets. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The second evening at Cresthaven Manor descended, with a brooding quiet, the weight of Reginald Poole's murder pressing heavily on its occupants. The drawing room, lit by the soft glow of lamps, felt stifling, despite the open windows, as if the secrets harbored by the guests had thickened the air. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, sat in his high-backed chair, his green eyes scanning the room with an intensity that unnerved even the stoic Inspector Japp. Captain Hastings, seated nearby with his notebook, sensed a shift in the investigation, a moment where the facade of civility might crack, revealing a glimpse of the truth. Poirot had spent the afternoon in quiet contemplation, studying the map of the manor's grounds and reviewing his notes on the alibis, the brass button, the damp handkerchief, and the missing cigarette case. He had declined to question the guests further, instead observing their interactions during tea, noting the strained glances and forced pleasantries. Hastings had watched, too, catching the way Clara Beaumont avoided Julian Ashby's gaze, and how Mrs. Lavinia Gray's knitting needles faltered when Lady Eleanor spoke of the estate. As the clock struck 7, Poirot rose, commanding the room's attention with a subtle clearing of his throat. Mesdames et messieurs, he said, his voice calm but resonant, we are gathered here under a shadow of tragedy. Monsieur Poole is dead, and the truth, it hides among us. I ask you now to reflect on your words, your actions, your secrets. The little gray cells, they see much, but the heart, it speaks when pressed. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Japp, standing by the door, folded his arms, ready to pounce on any slip. Hastings noted the tension in Julian's shoulders, the way Clara's fingers twisted her handkerchief, and the faint tremor in Lady Eleanor's hand as she set down her teacup. It was Mrs. Lavinia Gray who broke the silence, her voice sharp as her knitting needles. This is absurd, Mr. Poirot. You're treating us like criminals, when we're all victims of this madness. I've told you, I was knitting, here in this room, when Poole was killed. I had no reason to harm him. Poirot's eyes gleamed. No reason, madam. Yet you spoke of greed, of a promise unfulfilled. Monsieur Poole, he threatened your share of the estate, did he not? Mrs. Gray's face flushed, her needles clattering to the floor. He was a meddler. Yes, but I didn't kill him. I couldn't. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands, her composure crumbling. The room fell silent, the weight of her outburst hanging heavy. Lady Eleanor rose, her expression a mix of concern and reproach. Lavinia, control yourself. We must trust Mr. Poirot to find the truth. But Poirot's attention had shifted to Clara, whose pale face betrayed a deeper distress. Mademoiselle Beaumont, he said softly, you have been silent, yet the button, the handkerchief, they point to you. Why do you hide what you know? Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not hiding. Not what you think. I lied about the gardens, yes, but only because I was meeting someone. A gasp rippled through the room. Julian's head snapped up, his face darkening. Clara, what are you saying? She turned to him, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, Julian. I didn't want you to know. I met Dr. Vance in the gardens, just for a moment. He warned me about Poole, said he was digging into my past, that it could ruin us. Dr. Vance stiffened, his stern features tightening. That's preposterous, he said, his voice cold. I was in the library, as I told you. Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, you were there, Harold. You told me to stay quiet, to protect myself. I didn't know what to do. The room erupted in murmurs, Julian's fists clenching as he glared at Vance. You met my fiancé in secret? What the devil were you playing at? Vance's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on Poirot. Japp stepped forward, his voice sharp. This changes things, Poirot. Vance lied about his whereabouts, and Clara's stories falling apart. They're both in it up to their necks. Poirot raised a hand, his expression unreadable. Calm yourselves, Ms. Amos. Mademoiselle Beaumont. You have shown courage in speaking, but tell me, this meeting with Dr. Vance, what time was it? Clara wiped her eyes. It was just after 7:30. I slipped out to the gardens, and he was waiting by the fountain. We spoke for only a minute or two. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Vance. And you, Doctor, you deny this? Vance's face was a mask of control, but his voice betrayed a hint of strain. I deny it. She's mistaken or lying. I was in the library until I took my walk out back, as I said. Poirot's mustache twitched. The fountain. It is near the path to the boathouse. A convenient place for a rendezvous. Or for something else. Julian leapt to his feet, his voice shaking with anger. If Vance was there, he could have gone to the boathouse. He's the one. Poirot, he's trying to pin this on Clara. Enough. Lady Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos, her composure fraying. This bickering solves nothing. Mr. Poirot, please, tell us what you know. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Madam, I know that the truth is close. The lies, they unravel, and the heart, it speaks. The button, the handkerchief, the cigarette case, they are threads. But the knot, it is the human soul. Someone here has betrayed themselves, and soon all will be clear. As the guests dispersed, shaken by Clara's revelation and Mrs. Gray's outburst, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. That was a turning point, wasn't it? Clara's admission, Vance's denial, it's all coming to a head. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice low. The emotions, they boil over, and in their heat, we see glimpses of the truth. But we are not there yet. The tide, it recedes, and the secrets, they rise. Hastings felt a surge of anticipation, sensing that Poirot was closing in on the killer. The emotional cracks in the guests' facades had widened, and the little gray cells were poised to strike. Chapter 9. The trap. Third day at Cresthaven Manor dawned with a restless energy, as if the very stones of the estate sensed the approaching climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. The guests, worn by sleeplessness and suspicion, moved through the manor like actors in a play nearing its final act. Captain Hastings, ever attentive, noted the strange silences at breakfast, where even Lady Eleanor's attempts at civility faltered. Poirot, however, remained serene, his polished demeanor a stark contrast to the fraying nerves around him. By mid-morning, Poirot announced his intention to gather the guests in the drawing-room for what he called a little experiment. Inspector Japp, though skeptical, agreed, sensing that Poirot was ready to tighten the net around the killer. Hastings, clutching his notebook, felt a thrill of anticipation, knowing that his friend's theatrical flair often preceded a breakthrough. The drawing-room was arranged with precision, chairs forming a semicircle on a small table where Poirot stood, his hands clasped behind his back. The guests filed in reluctantly. Lady Eleanor, regal but pale; Julian Ashby, his eyes shadowed and his cigarette case still missing; Clara Beaumont, clinging to a fragile composure; Dr. Harold Vance, his face a mask of stoic defiance; and Mrs. Lavinia Gray, her knitting abandoned, her sharp gaze fixed on Poirot. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice carrying a quiet authority. We stand at a crossroads. A man is dead, and the truth, it hides no longer. I have observed, I have listened, and the little gray cells, they have worked. Now, I ask you to join me in a reconstruction of trap, if you will, to catch a killer. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. Japp, standing by the door, folded his arms, ready to intervene. Hastings leaned forward, his pen poised, as Poirot continued. Let us revisit the evening of the murder, Poirot said, pacing slowly. Monsieur Poole was shot in the boathouse between 7:15 and 7:45 p.m. The tide, it rose at 7:30, isolating the boathouse. The revolver, wiped clean, suggests planning. The cigarette butt, the brass button, the damp handkerchief, these are not accidents. They are threads in a tapestry woven by a clever hand. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. But the alibis, they crumble. Mademoiselle Beaumont, you were not in the powder room but in the gardens, meeting Dr. Vance. Doctor, you deny this, yet you were seen near the path to the cove. Monsieur Julian, your cigarette case is missing, and a butt was found at the scene. Madame Gray, your anger at Monsieur Poole was fierce, yet you claim to have stayed here, knitting. And Lady Eleanor, you speak of a delicate matter, a codicil, that set this tragedy in motion. Julian's fists clenched. You're accusing us all, Poirot. Get to the point. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, monsieur. The point, it comes. Let us imagine the scene. The murderer slips to the boathouse, shoots Monsieur Poole, and returns before the scream at 8:15. The tide, it protects them, washing away tracks. But they leave clues: a button, a cigarette, a handkerchief, perhaps by mistake, perhaps by design. I propose a test. We shall recreate the timeline, and you, Mzamas, will show me your movements. Japp raised an eyebrow. A reenactment. Risky, Poirot. Precisement, Poirot said, smiling faintly. Risk reveals truth. We begin at 7:15. Each of you, take your place as you claim it was. The guests hesitated, but Poirot's authority, was undeniable. Lady Eleanor stood by the dining room door, miming her oversight of the staff. Julian stepped onto the terrace, lighting an imaginary cigarette. Clara moved toward the garden door, her face pale. While Dr. Vance positioned himself near the library, Mrs. Gray sat in her usual chair, clutching phantom knitting needles. Poirot, stopwatch in hand, narrated. At 7:15, dinner is underway. By 7:30, the tide rises. Monsieur Julian, you are on the terrace. Mademoiselle Clara, you are in the gardens. Dr. Vance, you are. Where Vance's jaw tightened. I told you. I was in the library, then took a walk out back. Poirot nodded. Bon, let us move forward. At 7:40, Monsieur Julian, you return. Mademoiselle Clara, you meet Dr. Vance by the fountain. Show me. Clara, trembling, walked to the garden door, pausing as if meeting someone. Vance remained still, his eyes cold. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And now, the shot. No one hears it. Masked by the waves. But the murderer. They return, unseen. Who could move so swiftly? Mrs. Gray snapped. This is nonsense. I was here, knitting. I couldn't have reached the boathouse and back in time. Poirot turned to her. Madam, your knitting it is precise. Yet last night, I observed your work. You said you finished, but the stitches, they were uneven, hurried, as if you were distracted or absent. Mrs. Gray's face paled, her hands trembling. I was upset, that's all. The talk of the codicil. Poirot held up the brass button. And this, Mademoiselle Clara, you claim it fell in the gardens, yet it was in the boathouse. How? Clara's voice broke. I don't know. Someone must have taken it. Poirot's eyes flicked to Julian. And your cigarette case, monsieur? It is found by me, this morning, hidden in the library, behind a book. Why hide it? Julian's face drained. Of color. I didn't hide it. Someone's framing me. The room erupted in accusations, voices overlapping. Japp stepped forward, but Poirot raised a hand. Silence. The trap. It has sprung. The lies. They collide. One of you knows the truth, and now you feel the pressure. The little gray cells. They see the pattern. Hastings watched, heart pounding, as the guest's composure shattered. Poirot's trap had worked, exposing cracks in their stories. But the killer's identity remained just out of reach. The little Belgian stood calm, his mind weaving the final threads of the tapestry, ready to pull the knot tight. Chapter 10. The revealed drawing room of Cresthaven Manor was charged with an almost palpable tension, the air thick with the weight of accusations and half-truths. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small frame commanding the space with an authority that silenced the room. Captain Hastings, seated with his notebook, felt his pulse quicken, sensing that Poirot's little experiment had reached its crescendo. Inspector Japp, stationed by the door, watched with a mix of skepticism and anticipation, ready to act on Poirot's conclusions. The guests Lady Eleanor, Julian Ashby, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Harold Vance, and Mrs. Lavinia Gray sat rigid, their faces a gallery of fear, defiance, and guilt. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his green eyes gleaming with the clarity of a man who had unraveled a knot. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice steady and deliberate. The time has come to submerge the alibi and reveal the truth. Monsieur Reginald Poole was murdered, and the killer is among us. The clues: the cigarette butt, the brass button, the damp handkerchief, the The smudged footprint, they have spoken, and the little gray cells. They have listened. He paced slowly, his words measured. Let us reconstruct. The murder occurred between 7:15 and 7:45 p.m. in the boathouse, with a single shot from a Webley revolver. The tide, rising at 7:30, isolated the scene, ensuring no escape. The alibis. They were fragile, each of you. You had opportunity and motive. It abounds. The codicil, the inheritance, the secrets of the past, they weave a web of greed and fear. Julian shifted uncomfortably, his voice hoarse. Get on with it, Poirot. Who did it? Poirot's mustache twitched. Patience, Monsieur Ashby. First, the red herrings. The cigarette butt, found in the boathouse, points to you. Your case, hidden in the library, suggests guilt. Yet you are too obvious. The killer. They are subtle. The brass button, with Mademoiselle Claire's initials, found at the scene, yet she claims it was lost in the gardens. The handkerchief, damp with rust, not blood, another clue misplaced. And Dr. Vance, seen near the cove, yet denying a meeting with Mademoiselle Clara. Lies. They pile upon lies. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I told you, I didn't go to the boathouse. Poirot raised a hand. I believe you, Mademoiselle. The button, it was placed to mislead. But let us consider the lock. The door was unlocked, the key inside. Why? The murderer. They wished to suggest entry from within, yet they needed to escape. The tide. It was their ally, washing away tracks. But one detail. It betrays them. He turned to the map on the table, pointing to the path from the manor to the boathouse. The smudged footprint, the drag mark, the rust on the handkerchief, they tell a story. The murderer used the tide, not to trap, but to conceal. They returned to the manor through the shallows, their shoes wet, their hands stained with rust from the boathouse's old hinges. Mrs. Gray's voice was sharp. This is speculation, Poirot. You've no proof. Poirot's gaze fixed on her. Madame Gray, your knitting. It was uneven, hurried. You were not in the drawing room as you claimed. You were seen by no one after 7:20, when you slipped out, down the path to the boathouse. You knew Monsieur Poole would be there. He had arranged to meet you, to discuss the codicil. The room gasped. Mrs. Gray's face drained of color, her hands trembling. That's absurd. I was here, knitting. Poirot shook his head. Madam. The codicil threatened your claim to Cresthaven. You argued with Poole, your anger fierce. You brought the revolver, perhaps from your late husband's collection, and when he refused to yield, you shot him. You wiped the gun, left it to suggest suicide, and returned through the shallow water. Your shoes wet, your handkerchief stained with rust from the boathouse door. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. Lavinia, is this true? Mrs. Gray's defiance crumbled, her voice a whisper. He was going to take everything. My cousin's promise, my future. I only meant to scare him. But he laughed, said I'd get nothing. I couldn't stop myself. Japp stepped forward, his tone grim. Mrs. Lavinia Gray, you're under arrest for the murder of Reginald Poole. As the constables led her away, her shoulders slumped, the room fell silent. Clara sobbed softly, Julian's arm around her. Dr. Vance stared at the floor, his face unreadable. Lady Eleanor sat, her composure shattered, her hands covering her face. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. The heart, mon ami, it betrays. Greed, fear, betrayal, they drive the hand to kill. The little gray cells, they see through the lies. Hastings nodded. awed by Poirot's precision. The button, the cigarette case, they were distractions, weren't they? We, Poirot said. Mrs. Gray placed them, knowing suspicion would fall on Julian and Clara. The tide, it was her shield, but the rust, the uneven stitches, they betrayed her. As the guests dispersed, the manor felt lighter, as if a storm had passed. Poirot's work was done, the killer unmasked, but Hastings knew the little Belgian would soon seek the quiet of his reflections. The case closed with his signature blend of logic and humanity. Chapter 11. The reflection. The revelation of Mrs. Lavinia Gray's guilt lifted the oppressive cloud that had hung over Cresthaven Manor, yet the air remained heavy with the aftershocks of betrayal. The drawing-room, now emptied of its tense occupants, felt almost serene in the late afternoon light, the Cornish sea glinting through the windows like a promise of renewal. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression one of quiet contemplation. Captain Hastings, seated with his notebook now closed, watched his friend, knowing that this moment of reflection was as vital to Poirot as the unraveling of the mystery itself. Inspector Japp, bustling with the efficiency of officialdom, had overseen Mrs. Gray's removal to the local constabulary, where she awaited transfer to London for formal charges. Her confession, though coerced by Poirot's relentless pressure, had been complete. She admitted to the theft of the revolver from her late husband's study, her secret meeting with Reginald Poole, and the fatal shot fired in a moment of desperation. The codicil, which promised her a share of Cresthaven, had been her obsession, and Poole's refusal to validate it had driven her to murder. As the manor settled into an uneasy calm, Poirot requested a final word with Lady Eleanor and the remaining guests in the library, a room of dark wood and leather-bound books that seemed to echo his own sense of order. Lady Eleanor, her composure restored but her eyes weary, sat at the head of the table. Julian and Clara, their hands entwined, occupied one side, while Dr. Vance sat opposite, his stern demeanor softened by a flicker of relief. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice soft but resonant. The tragedy of Monsieur Poole's death is resolved, yet it leaves us with lessons. The human heart, it is a complex thing, driven by desires, greed, love, fear that can lead to destruction. Madame Gray, she sought to secure her future, but in doing so, she lost it all. Lady Eleanor's voice was steady but tinged with sorrow. Mr. Poirot, how did you know it was Lavinia? Her alibi seemed so certain. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. The alibi, madam. It is only as strong as its smallest detail, Madame Gray claimed she whereupon through the evening. Yet her stitches, they were uneven, a sign of distraction or absence. The damp handkerchief, stained with rust, not blood, pointed to the boathouse door, which she touched as she fled through. The shallows, the cigarette butt, the brass button, they were her attempts to cast suspicion on Monsieur Julian and Mademoiselle Clara. But the truth, it cannot be submerged. Julian, his face pale, squeezed Clara's hand. She tried to frame us. But why? Poirot's gaze softened. Monsieur, your inheritance. It was the prize she coveted. By implicating you and Mademoiselle Clara, she hoped to muddy the waters, to delay or prevent the codicil's enforcement. But the little gray cells, they see through such deceptions. The rust, the lock, the timing, they betrayed her. Clara, her voice trembling, spoke up. I thought you suspected me, Mr. Poirot. The button. My lie about the gardens, it looked so bad. Poirot inclined his head. Mademoiselle, Your lie was born of fear, not guilt. You sought to protect your love, your future. The heart, it complicates, but it does not always deceive. Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his tone gruff. And my meeting with Clara. You knew I was there, didn't you? We, Dr. Poirot, said, his eyes gleaming. Your denial, it was to shield Mademoiselle Clara, but it also shielded Madame Grey's deception. The fountain, the gardens, they were close to the boathouse. Yet you saw nothing. Your silence, it was a choice, but not a guilty one. Lady Eleanor rose, her hands clasped. Mr. Poirot, you have saved us from further tragedy. Cresthaven will heal, though it will take time. The codicil, it will be honored, as my husband intended. Poirot bowed slightly. Madam, I am but a servant of the truth. The order, the justice, it is restored. As the guests dispersed, Hastings joined Poirot on the terrace, where the sea stretched endlessly before them. You did it again, Poirot, Hastings said, a note of admiration in his voice. You saw through the lies, the distractions. But how do you stay so calm, knowing the darkness in people's hearts? Poirot gazed at the horizon, his voice thoughtful. Mon ami, the heart, it is both beautiful and terrible. It drives us to love, to create, but also to destroy. Yet the mind, the little gray cells, they bring order to this chaos. To understand the human soul, one must see both its light and its shadow. That is the philosophy of Hercule Poirot. Hastings nodded, struck by the simplicity and depth of his friend's words. And now, back to London. Poirot said, a faint smile returning. But first, a tisane, to soothe the soul. The case, it is closed, but the world, it continues to turn. As they walked back to the manor, the waves crashing below, Hastings felt a sense of closure. Poirot had once again unraveled the impossible, bringing light to the darkness of Cresthaven Manor. The little Belgian's quiet exit, as always, left the world a little more orderly than he had found it. Chapter 12. The echoes of truth. Resolution of Reginald Poole's murder had restored a fragile peace to Cresthaven Manor, but the echoes of the crime lingered, like ripples spreading across the still waters of the Cornish Cove. The guests, though relieved by Mrs. Lavinia Grey's confession, carried the weight of their own secrets, exposed in the crucible of Poirot's investigation. The manor, with its ivy-clad walls and polished interiors, seemed to sigh in relief. Yet the scars of betrayal remained. Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, spent the morning after the reveal tying up loose ends, his mind as sharp as the creases. In his tailored suit, Captain Hastings, his loyal companion, accompanied him as they walked the grounds, the autumn sun casting long shadows across the lawns. Inspector Japp had departed with Mrs. Grey in custody, leaving Poirot to ensure no detail was overlooked before their return to London. Poirot, Hastings said, pausing by the rose garden, you were certain it was Mrs. Grey. But how did you know the button and cigarette case weren't just careless mistakes by Clara? Or Julian? Poirot's green eyes twinkled as he adjusted his hat. Mon ami, the careless, it is rarely so convenient. The button, it was too perfectly placed in the boathouse. Yet Mademoiselle Clara's distress was genuine. The cigarette case, hidden in the library, why hide one's own possession unless to mislead? Madame Grey, she was clever, but not clever enough. The rust on the handkerchief, the uneven stitches, these were her true mistakes. They reached the path to the boathouse, where the tide had receded, leaving pools of sea-water glinting in the rocks. Poirot stopped, gazing at the weathered structure. The tide, Hastings. It was her accomplice, but also her betrayer. The water washed away her tracks, but it could not erase the rust. The mark of her hand on the boathouse door. Hastings nodded, marveling at Poirot's precision. And the codicil? Will it really change things for the Ashbys? Poirot's mustache twitched. The codicil? It is now in the hands of a new solicitor. Lady Eleanor. She will honor her husband's wishes, though it may mean a smaller share for Monsieur Julien. The truth. It brings clarity, but not always comfort. As they returned to the manor, they found Lady Eleanor in the library, sorting through papers with a weary determination. She looked up, her face softened by gratitude. Mr. Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You've saved Cresthaven from ruin. Though the cost. Lavinia's family. Poirot bowed slightly. Madam, the cost of truth is often high, but it is necessary. The heart, it heals, and Cresthaven, it will endure. Julian and Clara joined them, their hands still entwined, their faces a mix of relief and resolve. Mr. Poirot, Clara said, her voice steadier now. I was so afraid you'd think it was me. I should have told the truth about meeting Dr. Vance. Poirot's gaze was kind but piercing. Mademoiselle, the truth. It is a burden, but also a liberation. Your meeting, it was a distraction, but it helped reveal the greater deception. You and Monsieur Julien, you must now build on honesty. Julien nodded, his expression somber. Poole's meddling nearly tore us apart. I'll make sure Clara's safe, whatever the codicil says. Dr. Vance, lingering by the door, spoke up, his tone gruff but sincere. I owe you an apology, Poirot. I lied about the gardens to protect Clara, but it only made things worse. Poirot inclined his head. Doctor, your loyalty, it is admirable. But the truth, it is the better protector. You are a man of science, trust in evidence, as I do. As the group dispersed, preparing for the inevitable legal proceedings, Poirot and Hastings packed their belongings. The manor's staff bustled about, restoring order, while the sea beyond whispered its eternal rhythm. Hastings, carrying Poirot's valise, felt a pang of melancholy. It's always bittersweet, isn't it, Poirot? Solving the case, but leaving behind such turmoil. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, pausing at the manor's entrance. The truth, it is like the tide, it comes, it goes, it reshapes the shore. We, who seek it, must accept its power. But now, to London, where a good tisane and a quiet evening await. They stepped into the waiting car, the manor receding behind them. Hastings glanced back, the image of Cresthaven etched in his mind, a place of beauty and secrets, now cleansed by Poirot's unerring logic. The little Belgian sat beside him, his eyes half closed, already turning inward, ready for the next puzzle the world would offer. Chapter 13. The unseen thread's departure from Cresthaven Manor was imminent, but Hercule Poirot, ever thorough, lingered a moment longer to ensure no thread of the mystery remained unexamined. The Cornish sun hung low, casting golden rays across the cliffs, as if illuminating the final pieces of the puzzle he had so masterfully assembled. Captain Hastings, carrying their luggage to the waiting car, felt a sense of closure. Yet he knew Poirot's mind was still at work, tying up the unseen threads that others might overlook. The manor's inhabitants were preparing for a new chapter, one shaped by the revelations of Mrs. Lavinia Gray's guilt. Lady Eleanor had retreated to her study to meet with a new solicitor, tasked with untangling the codicil's complexities. Julian Ashby and Clara Beaumont, their bond tested but intact, walked the gardens. their voices low but hopeful. Dr. Harold Vance, ever the stoic physician, had returned to his practice in the village, his role in the drama clarified but not forgotten. Poirot, standing on the terrace with Hastings, gazed out at the sea, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft, "the case, it is closed. Yet the mind, it lingers. There are details small, but significant that we must reflect upon, to ensure the tapestry is complete." Hastings raised an eyebrow, setting down the valise. "Details?" "Poirot, you've caught the killer," Mrs. Gray confessed, "and the clues, the button, the handkerchief, the knitting, all pointed to her. What's left to consider?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They are never satisfied until every question is answered. Consider, for example, the revolver. It came from Madame Gray's late husband's collection. But how did she acquire it? The study, it is locked, and the key, it is kept by Lady Eleanor." Hastings frowned. "You think someone helped her?" "Not helped, perhaps," Poirot said, "but overlooked. The staff, they are loyal to Lady Eleanor, yet Madame Gray, she was family. A moment of carelessness, a door left ajar, such things allow a determined mind to act." Poirot led Hastings to the study, where Lady Eleanor had granted them access. To verify this final detail, the room was a sanctuary of order, with a mahogany desk and shelves lined with legal documents. A locked cabinet in the corner held Lord Ashby's collection of firearms, including several antique revolvers. Poirot examined the lock, his gloved fingers tracing its edges. "No sign of tampering," Hastings noted. "How did she get the gun?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The housekeeper, Madame Tuttle, mentioned a key left on the hall table last week, during a cleaning. Madame Gray, she was often in the manor, unnoticed. A moment's opportunity, and the revolver was hers." Hastings nodded, impressed by Poirot's attention to detail. "So she planned it all along, not a spur-of-the-moment act." "Precisement," Poirot said. "The codicil, it consumed her. She saw Monsieur Poole as the barrier to her future, and she acted with precision until the rust, the stitches, betrayed her." They returned to the terrace, where Clara and Julian approached, their faces brighter than before. "Mr. Poirot," Clara said, her voice steady, "we owe you so much. You cleared our names, gave us a chance to start anew." Julian extended a hand, his earlier defiance replaced by gratitude. "I was wrong about you, Poirot. You saw through the lies. Thank you." Poirot shook his hand, his expression kind. "Monsieur, Mademoiselle, the truth, it is a gift, but it comes with responsibility. Cherish your love, and let it be honest." As they walked away, Hastings turned to Poirot. "You've given them a fresh start, but what about Lady Eleanor? Losing her cousin to this, it must be devastating." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant. "The heart, it suffers, but it endures. Lady Eleanor, she is strong. She will protect Cresthaven, as she always has. The codicil, it will be resolved, and the manor will heal." The car arrived, its engine humming softly, and Poirot took a final look at the manor. The unseen threads, Hastings, they are the strength of the tapestry. The little gray cells, they find them, and the truth, it shines. As they drove away, the cliffs of Cornwall fading behind them, Hastings felt a profound respect for his friend. Poirot's genius lay not just in solving the crime, but in understanding the human soul, its flaws, its strengths, and its capacity for redemption. The case of the sunken alibi was closed, but its lessons would linger, like the tide's endless dance with the shore. Chapter 14. The final reckoning. Departure from Cresthaven Manor was marked by a quiet solemnity, as if the estate itself mourned the unraveling of its secrets. Hercule Poirot, his work complete, prepared to leave Cornwall, his mind already turning to the comforts of London and a well-earned tizen. Captain Hastings, however, sensed that his friend had one final act to perform, a last reckoning to ensure the truth was fully served. The manor's grounds, bathed in the soft light of a late afternoon, seemed to hold their breath as Poirot made his final rounds. Before leaving, Poirot requested a private audience with Lady Eleanor in her study, a room that had borne witness to the unfolding drama. Hastings accompanied him, his curiosity piqued by Poirot's insistence on this final meeting. The study, with its heavy drapes and orderly shelves, felt like a sanctuary, yet the air was tinged with the lingering pain of betrayal. Lady Eleanor, seated behind her desk, looked weary but resolute. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "you have done us a great service. The truth about Lavinia. It is painful, but necessary. Is there more you wish to discuss?" Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes sharp yet compassionate. "Madam, the case is closed, yet there remains a matter of the heart. The codicil. It was the spark of this tragedy. May I ask, have you examined its contents fully?" Lady Eleanor's hands tightened on a stack of papers. "I have. It confirms my husband's wish to divide Cresthaven's assets. Lavinia was to receive a portion, as was a distant cousin, but the bulk was intended for Julian, provided he proved himself responsible. Reginald Poole believed Julian's engagement to Clara might complicate matters." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "And Monsieur Poole? He was thorough, perhaps too thorough. His inquiries into Mademoiselle Clara's past, they stirred unrest. Did you know of his suspicions?" Lady Eleanor's gaze faltered. "I knew he was investigating her time in London, her associations. He hinted at irregularities, debts, perhaps, or connections to unsavory figures. I urged him to be discreet, but he was relentless." Hastings, standing by the door, felt a pang of sympathy for Clara. So Poole's meddling wasn't just about the codicil, it was personal. "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft. "The personal. It drives the crime. Madame Gray, she saw Monsieur Poole as a threat to her future. But you, madam, you protected your son, even when you suspected the truth." Lady Eleanor's eyes widened. "Suspected, Mr. Poirot? I had no part in this." Poirot raised a hand, his tone gentle. "Non, madam, I do not accuse you, but the key to the study, left on the hall table, it was your oversight. Perhaps that allowed Madame Gray to take the revolver. A small lapse, but significant." Her face paled, her voice a whisper. I never thought Lavinia capable of such a thing. I trusted her. The heart, it blinds us," Poirot said. "But now, you must rebuild. The codicil, it will guide Cresthaven's future. Monsieur Julian and Mademoiselle Clara, they must face their own truths, but they have love, and that is a foundation." Lady Eleanor nodded, her composure returning. "You're right, Mr. Poirot. I will ensure justice is done for my husband, for Julian, and even for Lavinia." As they left the study, Hastings glanced at Poirot. "You didn't tell her everything, did you? About the key, I mean. You could have pressed harder." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, the truth, it is a delicate thing. To shame Lady Eleanor further would serve no purpose. The key, It was a mistake, not a crime. The little gray cells, they know when to speak and when to be silent. Outside, the car awaited, its driver ready to take them to the station. Julian and Clara stood by the entrance, their faces brighter despite the ordeal. "Mr. Poirot," Julian said, his voice earnest, "we're staying on to help Mother sort things out. Clara's past. It's behind us. We'll make it work." Clara smiled, her hand in Julian's. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot. You saw the truth when I was too afraid to speak it." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, Monsieur, the truth. It is the path to freedom. Walk it with courage." As the car pulled away, Hastings looked back at the manor, its silhouette stark against the fading light. "You've left them stronger, Poirot. But what about Mrs. Gray? Will she find peace?" Poirot gazed at the passing cliffs, his voice thoughtful. "Madame Gray, she chose her path, driven by greed and fear. Justice will hold her, but peace, that is for her soul to seek. We, Hastings, we do what we can, restore order, shine light. The rest, it is life." The train to London awaited, and with it, the promise of quiet evenings and new challenges. Poirot's work at Cresthaven was done, but Hastings knew the little Belgian's mind was already turning, ready for the next mystery to test his little grey cells. Chapter 15. The tide-racy dust train to London clattered through the Cornish countryside, its rhythmic hum a counterpoint to the quiet reflection within the first-class carriage, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings sat. The mystery of Reginald Poole's murder at Cresthaven Manor had been resolved, the killer unmasked, and the tangled web of motives and alibis laid bare. Yet, as the cliffs and coves faded into the distance, Hastings sensed that Poirot's mind lingered on the case, savoring its intricacies like a fine vintage. Poirot, impeccably dressed as always, gazed out the window, his green eyes half closed, his mustache perfectly waxed. His hands rested on a small notebook, where he had jotted final observations about the case. Hastings, seated opposite, broke the silence. "Poirot, it's done. Mrs. Gray's in custody. The codicil will be sorted, and Cresthaven will go on. Yet you seem pensive." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon ami, the case, it is closed. But the mind, it reflects. Each mystery, it teaches us about the heart, the soul, the fragility of order. Madame Gray, she sought to control her fate, but fate, it is not so easily tamed." Hastings leaned back, his thoughts drifting to the manor's inhabitants. "Lady Eleanor will have a tough time rebuilding. Trust. And Julian and Clara, do you think they'll make it, with all the secrets that came out?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The young lovers, they have faced the storm and emerged stronger. Mademoiselle Clara's past, it is a shadow, but Monsieur Julian, he chooses love over pride. Lady Eleanor, she is resilient. Cresthaven, it will endure, as it has through centuries." Hastings nodded, struck by Poirot's insight. "And Dr. Vance? His lie about the gardens, why do you think he protected Clara?" Poirot's fingers brushed his mustache. "The doctor, he is a man of duty, but also of compassion. He saw Mademoiselle Clara's fear, her vulnerability, and sought to shield her, perhaps because he, too, knows the weight of secrets. His lie was a misstep, but not a crime." The train slowed as it approached a station, the platform bustling with passengers. Poirot closed his notebook, his expression serene. "The tide, Hastings, it recedes, revealing what was hidden. The clues, the button, the handkerchief, the cigarette case, they were like pebbles on the shore, scattered but telling. The rust, The uneven stitches. The key, these were the true markers of guilt. Hastings smiled, accustomed to Poirot's poetic turns. You saw it all, Poirot. The way you pieced it together, the timing, the tide, the psychology, it's remarkable. I thought Clara or Julian might be guilty, with all the evidence pointing their way. Poirot said, his voice soft. The red herrings, they were clever. But the little grey cells, they are more so. Madame Grey, she wove a net of deception, but she could not hide the human flaw, her anger, her haste. The truth, it always surfaces. As the train resumed its journey, Hastings glanced at his friend. What's next, Poirot? Back to London, a quiet evening, and then another case. Poirot's eyes twinkled with mischief. A tisan, first, mon ami, to restore the balance. Then, perhaps, a new puzzle. The world, it is full of disorder, and Hercule Poirot, he is called to restore it. The carriage fell silent, save for the train's steady rhythm. Outside, the landscape blurred into fields and villages, a world unaware of the drama that had unfolded at Cresthaven. Hastings felt a quiet pride in his friend's genius, a man who could navigate the darkest corners of the human soul and emerge with clarity. The case of the sunken alibi was over, but its lessons of truth, betrayal, and redemption would linger, like the endless ebb and flow of the tide as the train neared London. Poirot opened his notebook once more, sketching a small diagram of the boathouse, a final nod to the puzzle that had tested his little grey cells. The order. Hastings, he murmured. It is beautiful. Hastings nodded, smiling. Yes, Poirot. Beautiful indeed. And with that, the little Belgian detective closed his notebook, ready to face whatever mysteries awaited in the city ahead, his mind as sharp and unyielding as the Cornish cliffs they left behind.